This episode of Unified is brought to you in part by Oxford Pennant, designer and manufacturer of high-quality pennants, flags, and banners. You know how so many sports pennants are stiff and unpleasant to the touch? Oxford Pennant's products are genuine wool felt, just like old-school vintage pennants, so they're super soft. One touch and you can tell this is a quality product, and I should know. I've been using Oxford to produce my UniWatch pennants for years now. Oxford Pennant has a full catalog of retail product promoting popular hometowns and clever sayings, but their real specialty is producing custom pieces for weddings, parties, uniform-related websites, and other special events. Whether their client is a couple celebrating an anniversary or the NFL's Buffalo Bills, all Oxford product is designed and manufactured at the company's downtown studio in Buffalo, New York. I've known the Oxford Pennant folks for years, seriously, and I can honestly say they're really special people. Check them out at oxfordpennant.com and get 20% off your order with the checkout code UNIFIED. That's oxfordpennant.com and use the checkout code UNIFIED for 20% off.
Hello, it's the Unified Show. I'm Chris Creamer from SportsLogos.Net. With me, as always, from UniWatch, Paul Lukas. Party on, Paul.
And party on, Chris.
Today we will be talking about retired numbers, how to handle situations where a number might come back into circulation for whatever reason. If too many numbers are being retired these days, certainly feels that way. How we feel about league-wide retirements, protocols that teams might have, and as anything else we can think of that are retired number related. As well, we will be doing an update on some of the other logo uniform news from this week. The NFL, we had some big news this week. The NBA All-Star Game was just the other day. And of course, our question of the week. But before we do that, Mr. Paul Lukas, tell me, what is going on in your life?
Mr. Chris Creamer, my life has been pretty eventful since we last spoke. First on last Friday, I got my first COVID vaccination shot, which was a good thing, obviously, and I'm relieved to have that first shot out of the way. I'll get the second shot in a couple more weeks. It was really kind of a precision, very efficient operation. Like they kind of moved us in, moved us out. I was there a total of about 30 minutes in this big gymnasium at Medgar Evers College here in Brooklyn. I actually biked to my vaccination, which was nice, and biked back. I had no side effects, and so that was great. And that felt like such a milestone regarding the pandemic that the next day I decided to do something I hadn't done in a year. And those of us watching, or those of our listeners watching on video can see what that was. I got a haircut for the first time in over a year. And that feels like turning the corner somehow on the pandemic. Not that it wasn't like a playoff beard kind of situation like with hockey where I refused to get a haircut, but it was just one of those things I let go and go and go, and it feels good to have it taken care of. And I did it right here at home. My girlfriend cut my hair, and we actually have a barber chair in the house as a piece of furniture. It's a vintage 1940s barber chair that I've had for nearly 30 years. And this is the first time it's actually been able to fulfill its intended function. So I like to think that it was kind of happy to be put to its intended use.
I've sat in that barber chair. It's surprisingly comfortable.
It's very comfortable. No, it's in our house, it's like the throne.
Of course.
But for this past Saturday, it actually was a barber chair again. So that
Finally. Well, now it's going to be a new tradition now. You'll have to get your hair cut there every time.
Maybe at least once a year, the annual barber chair haircut.
Well,
Yeah.
it looks good. She did a good job.
Yeah. Well, you look good too, because you also appear to have gotten a haircut.
Thank you. I'd move over to the side for our visual watchers here so you can actually see it. Yeah, I saw pictures of your haircut and I thought, well, I'm not going to sit here all shaggy if Paul's going to look good. So this morning I went out, got a haircut. Plus, it's my wife's birthday today, so I figured this is your present.
Big spender.
You don't have to look at a caveman anymore. I actually had a pretty crazy week. And so many things happen. I'm just going to focus on one because we only have so many minutes for this episode. I actually had the fire department come to my house on Thursday.
Really?
Yeah, it It was 2:30 in the morning, and I was awoken by the smell of like burning plastic or some sort of fire, like that sort of burning smell.
Mhm.
And I thought, okay, maybe a house down the street or there's a factory or something. And I went up. I was walking around the house like a basset hound, just sniffing at everything, and telling myself it's probably nothing. Or, maybe one of the kids left the space heater plugged in. As kids tend to do, playing with the space heater. And I opened up the basement door, and then just a big whiff of, whew, okay, it's something downstairs. So I woke the wife up. Tell me I'm not crazy. We looked it up. It said it might be a gas leak or a fire in the walls. Not wanting to take a chance, got the kids out of bed, put them in the van, drove them up to grandma's house, and I called the fire department, where I stood outside for 45 minutes in negative degree weather uh, while they went through the house. Two trucks showed up, maybe about 10 firefighters in total, and they found absolutely nothing.
I
So
don't mean to laugh at your predicament, but that's like the classic. They examined my head, they found nothing.
that's right. I almost wanted them to find something, so at least
Yeah.
there'd be an explanation.
So to this day, you don't know what happened.
Well, one of them had a theory,
Mhm.
and that was that a skunk got underneath my back deck and sprayed the whole backside of the house.
Well,
And
that's a very distinctive odor, isn't
well, yeah, but it kind of smells like a burning gas kind of smell because
it?
of,
Oh.
well,
Oh.
for reasons I'm not getting into. But so it was kind of embarrassing. I was apologizing to all the firefighters as they drove away, and my neighbors, because firefighters don't turn their lights off when they're so 4 in the morning. These lights are bouncing off all the houses in here. But fortunately, everything was okay. And in the end, I got a nice quiet night's sleep because the whole family was at grandma's house.
All
So
right. Well, so it was a good drill, right? It's
yeah,
like a fire drill.
and we did it. We got up
Yeah.
and out of the house in 2 minutes. So
Yeah. Not bad.
that's it in Chris's crazy world. But speaking of crazy worlds, the uniform world. Segue,
Mhm.
segue.
Mhm.
We had a big day when it came to NFL uniform leaks the other day.
Yeah, we
When
did on Sunday, on Sunday.
Sunday, three different teams had their uniforms leaked, and we presume that they're legit. I don't know if you've got that confirmed or not yet.
I have not confirmed it, and like it was three different teams, but the interesting thing is that it was all from the same source. It was all from one seller on eBay
Mhm.
who was selling replica jerseys of what appeared to be the new Bengals black and alternate orange jerseys, and we know the Bengals are getting new uniforms this season. The Browns' new throwback, and we know the Browns are getting a new throwback this season, and a 49ers red throwback. And I at least had not heard that the 49ers were getting a new throwback, although it's not implausible that they would because they've had their white throwback for 3 seasons now, and they've maybe squeezed all the juice they can get out of that one. And so they might swap to the red. Now, did you actually see those listings live on eBay before the seller took them down?
No, I didn't. I just, everyone on Twitter sends me a message about it, and that's how I found out.
Right. The same with me. And I said, where are these coming from? And one guy said, oh, this one of them came from this guy on Twitter. And so I'm sorry, on eBay. And so I went to eBay and I clicked on the seller's other auctions and I saw they were all coming from this same guy. And he seemed to be, I don't want to say he was reputable in terms of whether he was selling authentic product or counterfeit product
Mhm.
or Chinese knockoffs, because I can't assess that. But he seemed to be reputable in the sense that he had 100% approval rating on eBay for the last 12 months for over 500 transactions. So at least he does business. Even if people know they're buying knockoffs or whatever, then they're happy with the knockoffs they're getting. Like he's not just selling garbage, or he's not a bullshit artist, or whatever. I think that might have been the first profanity in
Yes.
unified history here. So,
I,
uh,
I, said,
so
I said Schitt's Creek last week, so I don't know.
yeah. So, but he didn't seem to be a BS artist. And so to me, that added a sense of not presumptive legitimacy, but it added to the case that this wasn't just some guy making stuff up or something like that. And also just that we knew where these leaks had come from, because a lot of times things start circulating and it's hard to trace it back to the source. Where did it actually begin circulating? And in this case, we know where it started. The guy seemed to be, at least by eBay standards, to be somewhat reputable. And so at that point, I sent him a note through eBay. I contacted him and I explained who I was, and I said, where did you get these? How did you get access to them? I'm not challenging you or questioning anything about you. I just want the best information I can share with my readers. And a few minutes later, I saw that all the listings had been taken down. So I don't know if that
It's
was
your fault.
I don't know if it was my fault, but obviously at that point, everyone, myself included, had made screenshots and downloaded the photos, and so the toothpaste was out of the tube. And so I, at least, have not independently been able to confirm the legitimacy of them, but a former Bengals writer for The Athletic said that the Bengals designs matched what he had been told by a team source.
Okay.
And the Browns design certainly makes sense, and the 49ers design makes a certain kind of sense. What do you think of them? What do you think of what you saw?
Yeah, I was going to say, legitimacy aside, how do we feel?
Mm-hmm.
I like the Bengals uniforms. I know a lot of people are saying they look like the Chicago Bears. I think that's just because of the lighting in that one photo we had where the
Mm-hmm.
uniform appeared blue
Right.
rather than black. I'm a fan of Cincinnati wearing the Bengal stripes, the tiger stripes on the uniform.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. I think it's a great way to bring the identity, full circle, I guess. So I love that look. I like the Bengals wearing orange as well. It makes
Mm-hmm.
sense for them. Um, San Francisco, they look great with the drop shadow. I know you're a 49ers fan, so you
I
might
am.
you might think differently, but as a neutral observer, I love the drop shadow look on the 49ers.
Oh, I do too. I'm a fan of that throwback. Always have been. That was from the '94
Mhm.
throwback season. They took that all the way to the Super Bowl. The year they beat the Chargers. I'm a fan of that look. I assume they'll wear that with white pants, as they did in the past, rather than their usual gold pants. So yeah, I did that look.
A throwback of a throwback,
It
right?
is. I
Yeah.
think it may be like the first instance we've had of that anywhere in sports, of where they brought back the white version a couple of years ago, as I
Yes.
mentioned. And that, I think, was really the first time, because they're not calling it like a 1950s throwback. They're calling it a throwback from the '94 season, but that was a throwback.
But
So it's very meta, as we like
it,
to say.
it's like a throwback inception.
Yeah.
Um,
And the Browns.
well, I was going to say the 49ers wore a different helmet originally, right? Back in the 50s when they wore that
Yeah, yeah,
uniform.
yeah. They had a
So
silver helmet back in
so
those
it's a
days.
throwback uniform to 1994, but perhaps a
Yeah, yeah,
throwback
yeah,
jersey to, yeah, okay.
yeah,
And Cleveland, I mean, they brought back the drop shadow too, right? And then
yeah.
they just got rid of the drop shadow a couple years ago.
Yeah, well, it's a different one. It's more of it's really a block shadow, meaning it's connected to the numeral rather than like having the new numeral hover over it without a connection, which would be a drop shadow. And I love that look for the Browns personally. I Not the one they got rid of from a few years ago, but the classic '40s and '50s one that they're bringing back for this throwback. I think it looks great. So I think that's going to look really excellent on the field. I think it'll be interesting to see whether the NFL lifts the one shell rule, as has been rumored and discussed. And if so, the Browns could wear a white helmet with this throwback, as they did in the '40s. And of course, it was a leatherhead helmet in those days, a white leather helmet. But even if they don't end up having that option, if they keep the one shell rule, I think their current helmet, the basic orange helmet, will look fine with this throwback jersey. The Niners throwback, as I just said, I'm a fan of. Like that, to me, it's like we know what that looks like on the field. We've seen it before, and it'll look fine. The Bengals, I'm sort of reserving judgment a little bit until I see it over pads. And I know there have been some Photoshop mock-ups and all of that. And I really want to see the pants, because I think the Bengals pants right now are way too over the top. It's one thing to have a little bit of striker typing, or tiger tiger striping, a little bit of tiger striping. But the way they have it now, where it's just so much on each leg wrapping around, where it looks almost like a tail, only you have two tails, like wrap. It's too much. And the way they had it more in like the original Ken Anderson, Pete Johnson era, where it was a more sedate tiger striping down the side, and it was just straight down the side of the pants rather than wrapping and curling around to the front of the pants. I think that would be a better look. Also, I have to say, even though it's becoming more now, it seems like the rule than the exception in the NFL, I still have an instinctive bias when I see a jersey that doesn't have TV numbers, by which I mean, of course, numbers either on the shoulder or the sleeve. And this Bengals leak does not have TV numbers. It just doesn't look as NFL to me.
It
And
looks
it's
unfinished.
it does. It looks more like a knockoff or like a high school uniform or something. It just doesn't. It does, as you say, it feels unfinished. And this seems to be a trend we're seeing now in the NFL. And of course, NFL sleeves have been disappearing for years. So even the TV numbers that do exist tend to be more on the shoulders than on the sleeves. And then last year, the Chargers' new uniform set, no TV numbers. The Patriots' new set, no TV numbers. The Rams' new set, no TV numbers on the blue jerseys, although the bone, or as I like to call them, dishwater jerseys, do have them. Um, and so that seems to be maybe where the NFL or where Nike is going with jersey design now, to just not bother with TV numbers anymore. And for me, at least, it just doesn't look as official, or as it doesn't have the same kind of gravitas as a real NFL jersey. And so that's one thing I don't like about it.
It feels like, I mean, almost feels like a replica, right? Like a fan replica jersey.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah,
missing
or like some
something.
sweatshirt you got as a kid or something.
Yeah.
Like something that replicate. Yeah, it just doesn't feel as legit to me.
You're talking about the pants and worrying about them being too busy. So the one quote we got from the team was that these new uniforms are going to be clean. So
Right.
I hope
I
that
hope.
that's what he was referring to as well.
Maybe he meant no TV numbers. They're so clean, they're doing away with the TV numbers.
Oh boy, so that's going from one extreme to the other for you.
So that was big news and was certainly unexpected. And
Yeah.
I mean, leaks almost by definition are unexpected, but I really hadn't heard any rumblings. And certainly a long time, I feel like, since there's been a leak through eBay. Like that is an unexpected source for this
It
kind of thing.
it used to be a little more common.
Yeah, but these
Yeah.
days it's not where we typically see leaks
They've
surfacing.
tightened it up on eBay a little bit.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
probably the last time you'll see an NFL leak for quite some time on eBay after what happened this time.
I guess I'm going to follow up with the seller. He never did respond to me. As I mentioned, I contacted him and then he just took the listings down. I hope to get the whole story from him once these uniforms are released for real, which should be like within the next 2 months or so, because NFL official unveilings usually happen in conjunction with the draft.
Usually, well, last year was March and April, so
Right.
probably something similar this year.
Well, actually, the Rams held off, right? Like they didn't do their full unveiling until May.
Well, I meant logo. They did their logo in March.
Right.
That
Right.
that was like the first big thing during the lockdown last year.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you, Rams, for this.
Something to write about, right?
Yes, exactly. I was happy, something to do. We also had the NBA All-Star game, which was this past Sunday, and they did it, right? They did it. They wore the Indiana Pacers uniforms.
Yeah, and we had talked about this in our last episode. We had both hoped they would go with the regular team uniforms,
Yep.
One squad in color and the other squad in white, and instead they wore the Pacers themed uniforms that were planned for use when the game was originally scheduled in Indianapolis. And even though they moved the game to Atlanta and postponed it and all this business, it was very strange seeing those Pacers uniforms in Atlanta.
Especially considering that they're not selling these jerseys, correct? They didn't go to retail?
No, they had like T-shirts and things
Right.
based on them, but not the jerseys
I
themselves.
just
So
wonder
yeah, it was strange.
why
And
bother wearing the jerseys if they're not going to be sold, right?
yeah, and it really was an opportunity, as we discussed, to do something fun and different and special by having color versus white with the regular team uniform. So I was really disappointed by that. And also, as I think we also discussed last week, Indiana is getting the game again,
Yep.
or not again, but postponed. Instead of getting it this year when it was moved to Atlanta, they're going to get it, I think, in 2024.
Yeah, Utah's got it in 23, Indiana 24. And I think it's only fair that they wear Atlanta Hawks uniforms for that
They
game,
should, yes, they should do
right?
Hawks-based uniforms, right? Exactly. Or I don't know. They'll probably do like something based on the FloJo uniforms, is what I'm assuming. But
Yeah.
and I didn't think these uniforms were so bad. I know a lot of people did think so. A lot of people hated them. Apparently, I didn't. I didn't hate them. I thought they looked pretty cool. Actually, I liked the Pacers style treatment of the All Star
Mhm.
chest insignia, but it didn't make sense for this game.
If the game was in Indiana, they would have been a hit, right? These uniforms.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
just the locale's the only reason. Look, I like the uniforms. I love the uniforms. They look pretty silly though on that Atlanta court, which had
yeah.
nothing to do with it. So a bit of a whiff by the NBA there. They should have held on to these jerseys, put them in a box somewhere, let them sit for 4 years, age them like a fine wine, and bring them back in 2024.
Yeah.
But it's the NBA. Who knows? The NBA, they just like making as many uniforms as possible. So
Apparently, and they have now unveiled a new logo for next year's All Star game, which will be in
yeah,
Cleveland.
and surprise, surprise, it's the same template.
It's the same template. Well, basically everyone I know from Cleveland was just relieved that it didn't feature a guitar,
Yeah,
because every logo from that, or sports logo having to do with Cleveland recently, has had something to do with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and has used a guitar. And so instead, it shows Terminal Tower, which is a real Cleveland, a longtime Cleveland landmark, not a recent Cleveland landmark like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And everyone seems happy with that aspect of it. And it shows the Cavaliers' classic wine and gold colors, which is nice.
yep. Well, and if the locals are happy, then really, that's all that matters, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Still, I miss the creativity of a new logo every year. I miss looking forward to what the design will be.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know what the NBA is doing. The
Well,
Super Bowl, I
maybe they're dealing with the pandemic like the rest of us.
yes, since 2018, they got a
Right.
2 year head start on the pandemic.
All right. I was trying to cut them some slack.
No slack for this.
The
I
other news of this last week is that Major League Baseball is instituting an annual Lou Gehrig Day that will happen every year going forward on June 2nd, which is the anniversary of Gehrig's death, with all players wearing a patch. And to my knowledge, the patch design has not yet been revealed. Have you seen it, Chris?
They released a logo with the news release. I presumed that would be the patch, or at least the basis of the patch, but no. Aside from
It's
that,
not clear to me.
yeah,
And this is interestingly the third different league-wide Gehrig patch that Major League Baseball has had. On July 4th, 2009, which was the 70th anniversary of his famous "I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth" speech, Major League Baseball players throughout the league all wore a Gehrig patch, and that was a very simple one that just had the number 4 and I believe the MLB silhouetted batter
hmm
logo. Then 5 years later, on July 4th, 2014, they did it again with a more elaborate patch, and that one actually had a depiction of Gehrig at a microphone making the speech. So that was the 75th anniversary of that
now
speech.
that patch actually included the New York Yankees logo on it, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, because it showed was it on his cap or on his
On
jersey?
his jersey.
Because
So I
he was
thought,
wearing his uniform. And
yeah.
so teams other than the Yankees were essentially wearing a Yankees logo.
So I waited. I was like, okay, I can't wait to see the Red Sox wear this New York Yankees logo on their jersey. And if I recall correctly, the Red Sox game that day got postponed. So isn't that funny? It rained that day, so maybe
The baseball gods or the Red
baseball
Sox
god
gods?
said, "No, we're putting our foot down on this one."
But other teams still had to wear the Yankee. I hadn't thought about that. That's an interesting point. And so now this new patch, so apparently, unlike those other patches, which were just 1 year things, this is going to be an annual thing going forward, and it's in connection with the ALS Foundation and the whole Ice Bucket Challenge, which, as I recall, you have done.
I did. I did
You
the
did
Ice
do
Bucket
the
Challenge.
Ice Bucket Challenge.
I did.
So I guess that they're partnering and they're going to do a big ALS awareness push. And so it's interesting that they're doing this one on the anniversary of his death, June 2nd, rather than the anniversary of his speech, July 4th, presumably because they're going to have all sorts of Stars and Stripes stuff going on July 4th instead.
Wouldn't want to take away any space from that.
Yeah, wouldn't want to rain on that parade. So that's our uniform news major headlines for the past week. And before we get to our main topic, I want to tell you that this episode of Unified is brought to you in part by Homefield Apparel. Are you bored with all the cookie cutter t-shirts for your favorite college sports teams? Homefield Apparel, a premium brand out of Indianapolis, offers incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college sports designs, so you won't look like everyone else wearing the same Nike t-shirt. Homefield combs through historic collections to find unique logos, mascots, and other graphics, and then uses those graphics to make thoughtful designs for schools as large as the University of Alabama and as small as a Division III school like Hope College. Homefield has advertised on my website, UniWatch, and I can honestly say they're a great company to work with. And I can also honestly say that their t-shirts are absolutely the softest, plushest shirts I've ever come across, ever. And I got a package from Homefield just this past week because they're advertising with us, and I opened it, and I'm not making this up. It was like, holy moly! And I brought my girlfriend over and was like, feel this. And I asked them what's going on, and they said it's they use a proprietary blend. It's a blend of ring spun cotton, polyester, and rayon. But even though there are the synthetic components in there, it really does feel like the softest cotton ever. It was remarkable, and I'm not just saying it. It was just like, damn, that's a soft t-shirt. So check them out seriously at homefieldapparel.com and get 15% off your first order with the checkout code UNIFIED. That's homefieldapparel.com and use the checkout code UNIFIED for 15% off. And Chris, I understand you're going to have your own very soft Homefield Apparel t-shirts in your hands soon enough once the Postal Service figures out how to get them across the
Held
border.
up at the border. I don't know. Maybe them custom guards want their own Homefield Apparel t-shirt. Now, did you really
And
say
who would blame them? Who would blame them?
exactly? But did you really say "holy moly" when you opened up that box?
I did say holy moly. I like to say that sometimes.
I can't wait to get mine. I'm mad jelly, as the kids are saying.
Let's move to our main topic, which is how to handle retired numbers. And the reason we're talking about that this week is that since our last episode, there have been two unusual developments regarding retired numbers. First, the Arizona Cardinals issued number 99 to newly signed defensive lineman J.J. Watt, even though they had previously retired that number for Marshall Goldberg, who was a running back for the Chicago Cardinals back in the 1940s. And it's the same franchise, Chicago Cardinals, then the St. Louis Cardinals, and now the Arizona Cardinals. And then a couple of days later, the Houston Rockets announced that they will be retiring James Harden's number 13, which is not unprecedented, but is still an unusual thing to announce for a player who's still active. And Harden, of course, is still in his prime. He's 31 years old, and he's playing for the Brooklyn Nets, not far from where I'm sitting right here, in fact. And so these were both sort of unusual things, a team bringing a number out of retirement, as the Cardinals are doing for J.J. Watt, and a team announcing that they're going to retire a number for a still active player, not active with them anymore, but still active in the league. And Chris, I thought you would be a very interesting guy to talk about retired numbers with, because in Toronto, where you are, you've got a team that had the first retired number in all of North American sports, the Maple Leafs. Mm-hmm. And you also have a team that has no retired numbers, the Toronto Raptors.
How about that? I didn't even think about the Raptors.
It's true. Now, I mean, there's thought that they may retire a number for Vince Carter, but they are among the handful of major level pro teams that have no retired numbers.
We haven't retired for Michael Jordan yet.
No,
what's the deal?
Which is good, but we'll get to that kind of thing. So retired numbers have been around since the 30s, and Ace Bailey of the Maple Leafs was really the first player it was done for. And then Lou Gehrig, who we were talking about earlier, the Yankees retired his number 4. And that really kind of, those two things set the template for the idea of a retired number as an honor in North American sports. If you bring a number out of retirement, as the Cardinals are doing with number 99, that's not unprecedented. It's been done before. For example, when Jerry Rice was trying to get a spot with the Seattle Seahawks at the end of his career, I believe he played in some preseason games, but never made it to regular season. And of course, Jerry Rice wore number 80 throughout his career, but that had been retired for Steve Largent in Seattle. And Steve Largent gave his blessing for Jerry Rice to wear 80. And so Jerry Rice did, at least in those preseason games. In this Cardinal situation, there's a similar sort of blessing where Marshall Goldberg's daughter, because Marshall Goldberg's no longer alive, his daughter has said, yeah, it's okay with us if J.J. Watt wants to wear it. I have to confess, I had not heard of Marshall Goldberg until last week. He's not in the Hall of Fame. He may be a Cardinals great, but he's not quite at the level of, maybe it's my ignorance, but I had not heard of him. What do you think of bringing a number out of retirement like this for a team? Like, what is that okay? Is it, case by case basis? Does it matter?
There's only a few situations, in my opinion, where bringing a number out of retirement is acceptable. Aside from the situation we talked about a couple of weeks ago, where perhaps the New York Yankees are going to have to go to 3-digit numbers. There's one, okay, take the number out of retirement if that's the situation. A more realistic situation, if the player whose number is retired is making a comeback, yes, let him have his number back. If the player's offspring decides to play for the team, he gets to wear the number. It's up to him. If the player does something horrible and you don't want to retire his number anymore, then you can put the number back in circulation.
You mean horrible off the field?
Yeah.
He's no longer worthy of held in high regard.
Exactly. Like he murders his ex-wife or something.
Mm-hmm.
To me, those are the only 3 situations in which that's acceptable. Otherwise, the number's not retired and it's just all for show. And the number's in a level of excellence or a ring of honor.
Mm-hmm. So it defeats the whole point, you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. If you're going to retire the number. And so what you're saying is a player has to be good enough, make enough money to sort of usurp your honor, such as J.J. Watt. And J.J. Watt is more important than Marshall Goldberg now. Is that what we're
sort of like almost celebrity eclipsing history in some level? I feel like retired numbers, much like throwbacks, which we've talked about in this regard, retired numbers are history lessons. They're part of the story that the team tells about itself. And therefore they are history lessons, and they're educational, like any lesson. And so, as I said, I'd never heard of Marshall Goldberg until last week, but I have now. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing. Like, I learned something about NFL history, about Cardinals history, and future people are not going to learn that because unless this story of the number being brought out of retirement becomes part of the sort of pantheon or lore of the team, they're sort of getting rid of that history. And so, yeah, I feel a little funny about it. I'm not nuts about the idea of, certainly there are some numbers that probably shouldn't have been retired to begin with, and we'll get to some of those examples. But I do feel like once it's retired, just like that's part of your history. That's part of the story you're telling about your franchise and your team, especially for a team like the Cardinals, which, some teams, they change ownership a lot and the new ownership just doesn't care as much about having a connection to the old history. But the Cardinals have been in the same family for generations. It seems like they should really retain that history. And then what about a situation like with the Rockets and James Harden? I was surprised. It always seems weird to me to retire a number for a player who isn't himself retired. Like if the Rockets didn't want to issue number 13, which was James Harden's number, that's one thing. But to actually say we're retiring it now or we're going to, it seems very strange to me, especially because he could come back and play for them again.
And then they can bring it down from the rafters. And
it seems like that's something you do to cap off what has been a special career, in its entirety. And
Do they think that he's not going to come back and visit once he's retired? This is the only way they can get him in town.
I don't know. It seems odd to me. And there's a great example of it that I remember. I remember when it happened. I thought it was weird then, and that was in 1989. The Chicago White Sox traded Harold Baines, who had been an outfielder for them for 9 years and change. And in the middle of his 10th year, they traded him. And then upon trading him, they immediately announced that they were retiring his number, which like, okay, we're getting rid of you, but we're honoring you, which is, I guess, sort of similar to what the Rockets are doing with Harden. And Baines had been a good player, but not like he'd never won an MVP. He'd never even been in the top five in MVP voting. He'd been an all-star like 3 years. He was a good, solid baseball player.
He's a Hall of Famer now.
He is now, although a lot of people don't think he should be. And there was certainly not so much in his numbers at that point of his career to suggest that he would ever be a Hall of Famer.
Mhm.
And but aside from that, he'd been a nice player,
And he was only
and
30 years old.
he was 30 at that point. He was 30 years old. It just seemed odd to give that kind of honor to a player or to announce it. And then 6 years later, he came back and was reacquired by the White Sox and naturally reclaimed his number. But it just seemed very awkward. Like if they hadn't retired his number to begin with, they wouldn't have had that awkward. It just seems very strange to me. It seems like one of the rules of unwritten rules, if you will, of retired numbers should be that you wait until the player's career is over and not jump the gun like this. And I
It's
know other NBA teams have done this. Like I think Golden State has said they're going to do it for Kevin Durant. I don't know if they've actually retired his number, but they've said they're going to. Like, just wait till his career is done. And like, it's sort of like there'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done, like that kind of thing. Like, just wait, have a little patience.
I agree with you. It's again, it's an excuse to have the guy come visit for one last big standing ovation
Mhm.
once his career is all over. Like you said, like a little exclamation point on the career. Okay, you're done. Your best days are behind you. You've played 3 or 4 lousy seasons, and now you've hit the golf course. And come on by. We'll have one more big day for you, and put your numbers up there. And yeah, I mean that sounds like a lot of fun. But I'm not. I don't hate the what the Rockets did. I remember the seeing when Nolan Ryan played for the Texas Rangers. I remember watching him pitch, and then out in the outfield seeing his number on the wall for the California Angels.
Yeah, I think
Like
that's weird. I think that's really
it,
weird.
it seems a little unusual, but the legacy a player leaves with the team, you can know that immediately, right? Like when the Boston Bruins traded Ray Bork to the Colorado Avalanche, they could have hung his number the next day, right? You know that number is going to be retired. It's just a matter of whether you want to wait or not.
Yeah, I think to me, I would rather wait. And it's funny you mentioned Nolan Ryan because teams have these protocols of, we will only retire numbers for players who make the Hall of Fame, or we will only retire numbers for players who played the majority of their career for us, or whatever the case might be. And I it's funny because I've been saying there should be a hard rule, like you should wait until the player retires. But these other protocols, I find, I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm stammering here. I'm going to return to an example I often do, which is my favorite team, the New York Mets. When in doubt, I can always talk about the Mets. So Nolan Ryan obviously is a Hall of Famer. I believe he's had his number retired by more different teams than any other player in any sport. He's had his number retired by the Rangers, the Astros, and the Angels.
Mhm.
I think that's all of them. But Nolan Ryan, of course, started his career with the Mets, and he's a Hall of Famer. And the Mets could have retired his number, but he wasn't a particularly good pitcher for the Mets. He was young. He hadn't harnessed his control yet, and he hadn't really figured out how to be Nolan Ryan, how to be the express that he became. And so it makes total sense to me that the Mets have not retired his number. But then by the same token, Willie Mays finished out his career with the Mets.
Hmm.
And supposedly, the owner at the time, Joan Payson, the Mets owner, promised him that they would retire his number, but they never have. And there are some Mets fans who think they should. And he wore number 24 for the Mets, just like he did for the Giants. And frankly, those 2 years, I mean, if you look at the numbers, Willie Mays was an awful player for the New York Mets. You hate to say it, but it's true. And I'm old enough. I actually saw Willie Mays play for the Mets, and I was at a game where I saw him hit a home run, which was really exciting. But he was not a great Met. He was a great baseball player who happened to, play out the string with the Mets. And I don't, there are fans who think we should retire 24, that the Mets should retire 24. And I don't think they should. And I think it's fine that other players have worn 24. Ricky Henderson wore it, who was frankly a better Met, even though he's problematic in various ways, but he was a better player for the Mets than, than Willie Mays was. And more recently, Robinson Cano has worn it, and he's problematic in his various ways. But I'm fine with other people wearing it. And the mere fact that Willie Mays is Willie Mays and that he had a cup of coffee with the Mets doesn't mean much to me. And by contrast, and this is what I was sort of getting at as an example, the Mets used to have this player named Ed Kranepool, and he was certainly not a Hall of Famer, but he played, I've got it written down here, from 62 to 79, the first 19 years of the Mets franchise. Like every single season he played. And he was, and by like the 70s, he was the last original Met, or maybe by the late 60s, he was the last player who had played every single season. And they kept doing it until the end of his career. Now, nobody would say Ed Kranepool was a great player, but he was an important Met. And he was like part of this foundation that went back literally to the team's first season, like through the miracle of 69, all through the 70s. By the time he retired, he held almost all the offensive records for the team. He doesn't anymore, but he did for a long time. I would have retired his number 7, even though he was a mediocre player, but because he was important to the history of the team. And that, to me, I think that's fine. I don't think you have to have only Hall of Famers. I think Ed Kranepool's number 7, which will never be retired now because Jose Reyes wore it and other players have worn it since then. But to me, that is more worthy of retirement than Willie Mays' 24 with his cup of coffee with the Mets. And so I think there are different ways to approach number retirement. And I realize other people would disagree with me and say, like, Ed Kranepool, like, he doesn't deserve that. Willie Mays, now that, that's a retired number. It's just different ways of looking at it.
I think Ed Kranepool's number should be retired.
All right, I've got somebody else on the Kranepool bandwagon.
Reyes be damned. I mean, Kranepool, if you spend 19 years with a team going from their expansion season to the thrill of winning a World Series and a couple more NL pennants and then a few more lousy years, but you stuck with the team, you stuck with the franchise, you could have gone somewhere else. And you set a bunch of records. And especially those early years, right? Years where players come and go. This guy stuck around with the team.
Yeah.
Fans formed a bond with him. To me,
they did too. He was a popular player. He was Steady Eddie. He was he was a fan favorite.
That might be like the best example of a reason to retire a player's number.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm glad you agree, because I've had this discussion with some people and they say, like, Ed Kranepool, seriously? But when you've been with an organization that long, and especially when it goes back literally to the first season, that's sort of an unusual situation. And so yeah, there's different ways to approach this. And even the teams that do have rules, like the Red Sox supposedly won't retire a number until a player has been elected or inducted into the Hall of Fame, except they broke that rule for David Ortiz. As soon as he retired, they retired his number. And he still isn't even eligible to be on the Hall of Fame ballot because he hasn't been retired 5 years yet. And I think there's some question as to whether he'll be inducted because
of the era.
Yeah. And that, he was he took PEDs and, he was part of that scandal. And, the voters have not been kind to those players. So I don't know if David Ortiz is going to get into the Hall of Fame. But the Red Sox said, well, this rule we had is we're putting it aside for David Ortiz. So maybe if you're going to do that, like, just don't have the rule to begin with.
It's not so much a rule, more a guideline.
Guideline,
yeah. I'm a fan of a team that has a rule like that. The Blue Jays. Their rule is or was that a player had to go into the hockey player had to go into the Baseball Hall of Fame as a member of the Blue Jays with the Blue Jays logo on their cap. So they retired Roberto Alomar's number when he did that. But then they retired Roy Halladay's number after he passed away in 2017, I guess with the presumption that he would wear the Blue Jays logo on his cap. And then he didn't. So
did he wear a Phillies logo or he wore no logo?
He wore a blank logo.
A blank cap, yeah.
They have the two retired numbers, and again, they broke the rule. They retired the number early. That was a special circumstance
Mhm.
because a player dying young. Uh, I mean, essentially, if you make the rules, you can break the rules, and that's what the Red
Yeah,
Sox are doing.
yeah,
That's
but
what
maybe the lesson there is that it's better not to
don't make the rule.
announce.
They make the rules basically to avoid that awkward conversation with the fringe players that they don't want to,
Right, right. To
right?
say, all right, let's not even talk about these guys. They don't
No,
make the
no,
cut.
we don't want to retire his number because he's not in the Hall of Fame. Sorry, it's out of our hands. It's the
Right,
rule.
right, right.
It's a bit of a cop out, but it's good to have some protocols, especially if you're a team that's been around forever,
Right,
and
right,
a team like the Celtics or a team like the Yankees.
right.
And
Who
I
have
know
so many retired
I'm
numbers,
jumping
but
ahead in our schedule here,
we
but
don't, well, because some teams have, how about a protocol for non-players? Because some teams,
okay,
some teams retire numbers for owners, like the Angels have retired number 26 for Gene Autry, who was the owner at the time, I guess because he was the 26th man,
mhm.
on the 25-man roster. Or for coaches like the New York Knicks, who've retired number 613. And it's a good thing they took that one out of circulation, right? Because
Jeez, yeah, that's what I
all the
was going to
players were
wear.
clamoring for that one.
I'm gonna
And
have to
that was
wear
for Red
614.
that was for Coach Red Holtzman's win total, 613 wins. A lot of teams have done things for fans, like the Seahawks have retired number 12 for the 12th man. In the NBA, the Magic and the Kings have retired number 6 for the 6th man. For local tragedies in the NHL, the Golden Knights have retired number 58 for the 58 victims of the 2017 Las Vegas shooting. And then you alluded earlier to the idea of Michael Jordan. Uh, Teams have retired numbers for players who never even played for them, like the Miami Heat, who retired number 23 for Michael Jordan, which just seems absurd to me. What I guess that's their version of doing like the league-wide thing for Gretzky or for Jackie Robinson. What do you think of aside from that, aside from the Jordan example, what do you think of these other, like for coaches, for fans, for the owner, for local tragedies, etc.?
Hang a banner. You don't need to retire a number. Uh, I think the Red Holzman put up a banner that says 613. That's great. He's up in your rafters. He's there forever. The Jays did that with Tom Cheek, their broadcaster who broadcasted 4,306 games. No Blue Jays ever going to wear that number, I assume, but they have that number up there. I think that's a good way to acknowledge without taking a number out of rotation. And the Minnesota Wild's one example, just like the Seattle Seahawks, the Wild retired number one, I think just before their very first game, because the fans are number one. Um, and just imagine, like, say you get a big name goalie who wants to come to the Minnesota Wild,
Right?
and
Can you
his,
imagine
yeah,
going through your whole franchise history without ever having a goalie wear number one?
that's what the Wild have.
I know,
But
but that
I'm
just
just
seems
picturing
bizarre.
like you get like a Hall of Fame level goalie to come to your team. He's worn one his entire career, and he's like, "Okay, give me my number one jersey." And you're like, "Sorry, that number's for the fans."
Right.
It just seems like a very silly conversation to have with a player. It's like Taiwan Walker not being able to wear 00 because of Mr. Met. Like,
Right, which we just discussed a
come
few weeks
on
ago.
now, like let's take this a little more seriously, perhaps. That's how I feel about it. Hang a banner, hang a number 12 for the Seahawks. I know Seahawks fans love that 12th man thing, but it is kind of weird, right? That no player can wear 12
They'll
because
never have a quarterback wear number 12.
Jim Kelly, sorry, you can't wear.
Yeah.
It's the only
Uh,
quarterback I could think of. Um,
getting back to the Mets, as I like to do for
yeah,
all these conversations, they have retired or honored William Shea's name because he was the attorney who helped bring National League Baseball back to New York after the Dodgers and Giants left, and Shea Stadium was named for him. And a lot of fans felt the new stadium Citi Field didn't have enough Mets history in it. And so one way they tried to bring a bit more Mets history to it was by honoring William Shea and putting his name the way it would look on a jersey, not with a number, but just his like a nameplate kind of treatment. And they hang it with the retired numbers. So next to Tom Seaver's 41 and next to the other retired, Mike Piazza's 31 is just a circle like the circles for those other numbers, is a circle with William Shea's name. And so that's kind of nice. It gives it the same status.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think the other teams you could do that for Gene Autry. You could do it for Red Holtzman. I don't know what the Mets will do if they ever get a player whose last name is Shea. Like, is the
Is the
name
name
on the back of
retired?
the jersey retired?
Oh
But that
man,
seems unlikely. So, that would be
probably,
a
yeah.
special occasion.
Jeez. The Blue Jays do that. I always talk about our team because that's what we know best. But the Blue Jays do that for Pat Gillick. They have his,
Oh, and does his name hang with the retired numbers?
yeah, they got Pat Gillick, and it just says his name with the Baseball Hall of Fame logo, and then they have a 12 and a 32.
Uh-huh. All right. So it's sort of equal status.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Do we have like I know we didn't have this written down here, but we talked about some of the protocols teams had, and there's a couple of interesting stories. One is the Detroit Red Wings, who back in the 1930s, I guess one of the first teams to do this, they retired the number of Larry Owery, who wore number 6. He helped the Red Wings to their first couple of Stanley Cups back in the 30s, but the team has refused to acknowledge it in any way by raising a banner in Joe Louis Arena and now in Little Caesars Arena. Uh, but even though they refuse to raise a banner, they also refuse to let a player wear the number. So
So
despite,
it's out of
yeah,
circulation, but it's not. It
it,
hasn't been honored. And why
it's a
is
bit
it?
of,
Like, what is their story on that?
they won't give a story, really. I found one quote from a team spokesman from 1997 who said, oh, it's because he's not in the Hockey Hall of Fame. But I mean, they broke the rule. They retired Steve Yzerman's number before he went in the Hockey Hall of Fame. They retired Nick Lidstrom's number. So it seems like that's probably not the reason. There's some reason why they won't do this, and it's a bit of an odd story because you ask any Red Wings fan, and none of them know the reason, and the ownership won't give a reason. But when Mike Modano signed with the Red Wings for his final season, he wanted to wear number 6 because it's number 9 upside down, and number 9 is retired for Gordie Howe. And the Red Wings just said, nope, sorry, that number is not available. So he
Well,
wore 92.
that sort of raises the question. Instead of retiring numbers, would it be better to have, as you mentioned, like a ring of honor or some sort of pantheon of honor where players have their names, posted in the rafters or around the stadium or the arena or whatever it might be, and they have a special page in the yearbook and blah blah blah. But their numbers are not completely taken out of circulation, but maybe reserved for special cases that, like, when you get a really great star player or whatever it might be, that it's understood that if you wear this number, it's an honor, that it's like it comes with sort of a special responsibility and this has been bestowed upon you. And instead of taking the numbers out of circulation, the numbers get to be worn and they still tell part of the story of your franchise history because it's understood that it's a special thing.
Mhm.
But that you're not running out of numbers like the
Right.
Yankees and Celtics are.
The Dallas Cowboys do something like this, right? They
A
don't.
lot. It's more common in the NFL
Yeah.
because in football you have numbering requirements, right? You have eligible and ineligible receivers, and you also have number by position guidelines from the league. And so, yeah, if you retire too many wide receivers numbers, you'll run out. And so it's more common in football to have this sort of approach to things. And I've had a lot of UniWatch readers say, like, I think that's a better way to go. Instead of, like, it's stupid to retire a number, like, it, because then the play, maybe some fans know about Marshall Goldberg or whatever or not. But if the number can still be worn, but it's understood that it's a special number, that, and we talked about this a few weeks ago too, that some college teams do this, like number 25 for Virginia Tech is Frank Beamer's number, and they actually rotate that week by week, not like year by year, one player wearing it for a number of years or anything like that. But I could see that a certain player's number, again, if we're talking about our favorite teams like Robbie Alamore's number or Roy Halladay's number, that would come with a certain amount of prestige,
Right.
if you get to wear it, and maybe a bit of pressure too for the player, but maybe
Yeah.
he lives up to that pressure. And I can see how that could be a sort of interesting way to go instead of the retiring thing.
Again, hometown team. Sorry, folks, but it's what we know best. The Toronto Maple Leafs for years, they had a bit of a weird policy, and that was your number's only retired if you die as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Oh
Or,
man.
yeah,
And so that went back to Ace Bailey.
yeah, well, Ace Bailey suffered a career-ending injury with the Maple Leafs, which was the second possibility. Either you have a career-ending injury or you die as a member of the Leafs. So they had Ace Bailey and Bill Barilko, the only two retired numbers forever. And from that point forward, any player who was worthy of retirement, they would honor the number. They would still hang the banner above center ice. The banner would be in a different color, but it meant the number was still in circulation. And you would see these numbers all the time. So, like a legendary number to Leafs fans, like 27, worn by Frank Mahovlich, worn by Daryl Sittler, was being worn by John Kordick, who was a tough guy enforcer in the 80s, not the type of guy you'd expect to wear 27. And then as I was growing up, it was worn by Shane Corson. And the idea the Leafs had, and I kind of like this idea, was it keeps the tradition alive of seeing that number actually being worn, and it continues to tell the story of that number.
Mm-hmm.
For a few years, players who wore those numbers would wear a special patch on their shoulder that had the player's name on it. I can recall, like,
You mean the original player, the honoree?
yeah, correct. So there was a goalie for the Leafs who wore the number one, and they had, like, Johnny Bauer and Turk Broda both had their numbers retired, and they would wear a patch that said Bauer and Broda on their shoulder, just as a way to carry on that tradition and that history and continue to tell the story, and still allow players to wear numbers they actually want to wear, that are historically important to the franchise.
I kind of like that idea.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. You reserve the retired numbers for the best of the best, right? Maybe
Mhm.
that's where you have your Boston Red Sox type rule. Only Hall of Famer who spent, let's spend their entire career with the Red Sox. Like, that seems like a very small group.
Yeah, well, good luck in the free agent.
But the rest of the group, okay, is still in there, but maybe you wear a little patch or some sort of recognition for the player.
Yeah, yeah. I think we've solved the problem. I think
Problem
I think
solved. Once
that's I
again,
think
Paul,
that's
we've
the
solved another
solution.
problem.
Yeah, I think we definitely should not have the Maple Leafs rule that you have to die as a member of the team.
They don't have that rule anymore.
That's good.
A few years ago, as a surprise, they just retired all of their honored numbers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You
So they
didn't have to die
retired.
like on the ice or anything, did you?
No, it was the player that they retired because he died. He scored the Stanley Cup championship winning goal, and then in the off season died in a plane crash. So it was,
Ay, ay, ay.
yeah. It's actually a very famous story in Canada. They made a song about it. Tragically Hip. Look them up.
All right, I think we have covered and indeed gotten to the bottom of and solved what to do
Once
about
again,
retired numbers
there is no uni problem that we can't solve on this
that we
show.
can't solve. Yeah.
This is Streaker Sports, and Unified is proud to be supported by StreakerSports.com. If you are looking for really unique sports apparel, Streaker Sports has dug deep into the archives and brought back some incredible defunct team logos. And I can relate to that. It's a lot of fun. They've even created entire collections based around defunct leagues like the ABA, WHA, and the WFL. Every couple of weeks, they release more teams and leagues. So if you're a fan of sports history, they are a fun brand to follow. They also have collections celebrating sports culture, including a licensed Miracle on Ice collection and apparel from movies like Slapshot and Caddyshack. And they even have the only officially licensed wiffle ball apparel, which I know Paul loves.
Do.
You can check them out at streakersports.com. And for a limited time, only for Unified podcast listeners, use checkout code UNIFIED to get 20% off of your order. Again, that's streakersports.com. Checkout code UNIFIED for 20% off. We have a question from Waffleboard. I'm not sure if that's his real name or not.
It
Probably
is
not.
not his real name. I am familiar with the pseudonymous Waffle Board, and he is a longtime UniWatch reader who lives in Vancouver.
Vancouver. Oh, good. Well, I've come across him a few times on Twitter, I know. And the fact that he's from Vancouver makes sense because his question this week has to do with the Vancouver Canucks. It's a good question. If the Canucks had somehow managed to beat the powerhouse New York Islanders to win the Stanley Cup in 1982, would they still be wearing those flying V uniforms today? Wow.
This is a classic waffle board question because he is, I don't want to say obsessed, but let's say he is a very big fan of the Flying V design. He is like a really big fan of it. And I think, on the one hand, that seems like a really specific question. Like if one team had won the Stanley Cup, would they still be wearing one uniform? But I think it hits at a larger issue, which is, does team success influence uniform choices? And I think that's something that is more of a thing now, where I hear people say like, well, they went to the playoffs in that uniform. You got to keep that around, or they won a championship in that, and I don't really like the design, but it was a win. It's what they won the title in, or whatever it might be. And I have to say, personally, I don't relate to that at all. Like, I just think a good uniform is a good uniform, regardless of how you play in it, and a bad design is a bad design, regardless of how you play in it. And I don't want to. I guess I do want to. I'm going to circle back to the Mets yet again by saying that from '62 to '68, the New York Mets were arguably the worst professional sports franchise for a sustained run of futility ever. They were just a terrible, terrible team. And if that happened today, if a team had like a 7-year run of futility as bad as the Mets were during that period, there might be a lot of fans saying like, we got to change these uniforms. Like, these uniforms are bad news. This is a bad era. We need to turn the page. All those cliches. And thank God the Mets didn't do that, because that is a great uniform. It was a good look back then, and it still looks great today. It's essentially what they still wear today. They made a few minor tinkers with it, but and I'm glad nobody said, oh, this team stinks, we better change the uniform. And I do think if the Canucks had won the cup, then maybe we would see the Flying V back as at least as a throwback. Right. Like, and I'm sort of surprised they haven't done that. And I really wish they had done that for the reverse retro. I wish that had been the kind of template they used for their reverse retro. But I don't know. What do you think about all of this?
I agree to an extent with you. It's a good thing the Mets didn't change their uniforms. I guess that's what I agree with. But winning does have an impact on a uniform, rightly or wrongly, right? So many times, okay, there's two different types of uniforms fans always want to bring back, and they usually have nothing to do with that, whether they look good or not, right? It's either this is the uniform they wore when the team started, and we all sort of formed our bond with the team, or this is the uniform the team wore when we had our first real taste of success, our first championship, our first big run, where the whole town was like, yeah, got the big playoff fever. If the Vancouver Canucks won the Stanley Cup in 1982, I think they would have kept the Flying V uniforms a little longer than they did, because, I mean, they only wore them for maybe 2 or 3 years after that. Uh, what would have happened, though, is they would have eventually rebranded in the 90s. Like, a good indicator is like, what did the New York Islanders do? The Islanders won 4 cups in those classic uniforms, and then they just abandoned them in the 90s. So
That's a great point. That's a really great point.
So I think the Canucks would have done the same thing. They would have gone to the whale in the 90s anyways. It maybe they would have kept it for a few years, and then eventually now they would be wearing black and gold again. They wouldn't be wearing blue and green, because black and gold would be the color scheme that the fans remember fondly with. Okay, we won the cup wearing this.
Right.
Who cares about the blue and green era? That was our expansion seasons. We
Right.
stunk.
I mean, they did go to the Cup Finals.
Yeah, they went to the Cup Finals twice wearing the black and gold.
Yeah,
They
I
did it
mean, isn't
again
that
in
enough?
'94. It's not enough to overcome, and I'm sorry, Waffle Board, it's not enough to overcome what was a terrible uniform. Um, they would go back to black and yellow, and the Flying V would be back as an alternate, or it would be incorporated in the design somehow. Like, they'd have the V's on the shoulders or V's on the pants as some sort of nod to, this is our look, but we acknowledge it doesn't look nice, but it's still an important part of our history. And they would work it into their uniform design somehow.
Do you think they should at least bring it back as a throwback, if only because it's so unique and interesting? It's such a different.
I
There's no other hockey uniform like it.
My answer to whether it should be brought back as a throwback is always yes for every uniform, because a throwback is temporary, right? You want to wear it one night, great. You want to wear it 4 or 5 times a season, perfect. You want to make it full time, pump the brakes. Like we don't need to do that. But anything's fine for a handful of games, including a really ugly yellow uniform with yellow helmets.
That looks like a safety vest or a traffic cone or
Yes, exactly.
whatever. That's a really good answer. All right,
Thank
I
you.
think Chris, I think we have once again found our way to the end of an episode.
It's 6 episodes in the book.
Not bad, not bad. All right, I'm going to take us out.
Okay.
I'm going to take us out by saying Unified is a joint production of UniWatch and SportsLogos.Net. Our producer editor is Chris Fraderigo. Show notes for this episode are available at our website, unified.show. You can follow us on Twitter at UnifiedCast, where you can also learn about the t-shirts and stickers we have for sale. The Unified logo is by Brian Gundell. Our organ music is by the Seattle band Boat. If you're listening to us on audio, you can also see video versions of all our episodes at youtube.com/sportslogos. The animation at the start of our videos is by Michael Princip. To submit a question for our Question of the Week segment or to inquire about advertising or anything else, email us at info@unified.show. If you like our show, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And that's it for this episode. Stay well, stay unified, and we'll see you next week.